All right, here we are. Thank you so much again for joining us on a Saturday morning. And I appreciate you, as always, for joining another edition of At the Mic. I'm your host, Keith Malinak. And this is the second part in a series that there's just no telling. There's no telling how many of these we're going to do. We're gonna do these Disney history themed conversations with Disney guru, history guru Ed McCrae, until we get everything covered sufficiently. Quite honestly, and I don't know. He and I have talked about this. I have no idea how many episodes that's going to end up being, and so we just appreciate you being along for the ride. And now, a week ago, and you can go back and find this if you didn't get to see this. A week ago, we covered kind of the early days of Walt, and how he got into animation, and really where he just started drawing. Quite frankly, it was a fascinating discussion with my friend Ed McCrae, and I'm going to bring him back in here. Good morning, Ed. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm fine and happy to be here.
All right. Well, thanks for making time yet again. And I want to, from the onset, let you guys know that are watching here that we do realize that we had some audio issues last week. So please, right now, if you could tell us in the chat and make sure that Ed and I are on the same volume level, please. I don't have fancy monitors or anything like that here, just doing it by ear. And so if you guys could let us know, we'd really appreciate it, just to kind of confirm we think, but we'll fix it if we need to. Okay, so see, look at that. See, I had to make sure that my microphone, because I've actually done an interview and thought I was talking into this and I was talking into that, and it was, yeah,
Technology's great, isn't it?
it's a learning experience. So anyhow, so hold on, let's see. Ed, why don't you give us a start here about where we're going to go? I think today's focus is going to kind of be the faith aspect, the role that faith played in Walt's vision, and I just want you to take us down this road here.
Well, I'll start. How I got interested in this part was when The Wrinkle in Time came out. People were upset that they didn't include some of the Christian stuff from the story. And the person that wrote the story, she did an interview and she did this whole thing about how we've moved beyond Christianity now and we don't need that in the stories.
What year was that?
I think it was 2015 or 16, because Oprah was in the movie and she said the movie was confronting Trump. And I've never seen the movie, so I don't know what's in it. I was not interested in.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, and then when it failed, they blamed it on racism and sexism and all the other isms. And I mean, that's a beloved book. There's a documentary on Tubi that has all the Christian authors of the early 20th century. And there's C.S. Lewis and Aaron Tolkien, and the author of The Wrinkle in Time. She's one of them they included. I think she was the last one they included. And they included books that inspired them in their work too. In this, I don't remember what it was called, but it was there.
Okay, all right, and yeah, go ahead.
When the Chronicles of Narnia came out, they kind of hedged on that too, that it had faith aspects to it, and they downplayed it. But then they used the advertisers that did Passion of the Christ to advertise to the Christian groups. And the the director of the movie, he said he grew up with the books and he had no idea that it had any Christian stuff in it. He just thought Aslan was a good lion.
Okay, I mean, I think you're scratching the surface of
this is what got me interested in it, because they're saying Walt Disney hated Christianity, hated religion. And I remembered the movies, and there was always this thread going through the movies. And I started looking, and I found all the stuff we're going to talk about today.
I'm looking forward to it. I mean, really, this story of Walt's faith and the direction that he saw the company going, I guess, really gets rooted in his upbringing and his parents, right?
Yeah. His dad was, he come from, his dad's family immigrated to Canada from Ireland, and they were very strict fundamentalist Christians. He had 11 siblings or 10 siblings, something like that. And they came down to America for work. And his dad, Elias, was the only one of that family that clung to the traditional Christian values. All the others fell away.
Oh.
So he was a very devout Christian, and he traveled around the country doing different jobs. He had a lot of failed businesses, so he was very frugal and cared about. See, he gets painted as a villain in a lot of modern histories, but there were motivations why he was that way, when he was always working for money and everything. And I always compare him to a Puritan because he didn't like frivolity. He thought that fantasy books are a waste of time. Candy was a waste of time. Two of his sons ran away from home because they wanted to buy pocket watches instead of something serious. And I mean, this was how strict he was.
No kidding.
And Walt was born into the family here, and they were living in Chicago at the time. And his dad built the church that they attended in, and the pastor's family and Walt's parents were very close. And the pastor's name was Walter Parr, and so they named Walt after the pastor. And the pastor they both were having kids at the same time. The pastor named his son Elias after Walt's dad. And they were so close that Walt's dad would preach sermons in the church. Sometimes, the pastor wasn't there. His mom would play the piano for the service, or the organ. They ended up leaving Chicago because they were afraid of the crime rate. And that sounds familiar for today. And they moved to Missouri.
Some things never change, right?
No, it's Chicago, so it's the same town.
Yeah.
And even back then, they had one of their neighbors' kids got mugged in a barn or something in Chicago, and that's what was the catalyst for moving.
Right,
and
that'll do it.
So Walt was about 4 years old, and when they moved, and he grew up in Marceline, Missouri. He always thought of it as his hometown. They always did devotions around the family table. It was, very strict family.
Mm-hmm. And what years roughly? When was Walt was born in the late
1901? He was born.
1901. Okay.
Yeah, so they would have moved around 1904, 1905, something like that. Kansas City. Well, they lived in Marceline, then they moved to Kansas City after that. They had a farm in Marceline, and that's where Walt really always looked back. That's where he became who he became, was at this farm in Marceline, Missouri. And his dad would also welcome people in, like there'd be a lot of transients on the street. They'd be walking across the country, like you'd have hobos we know about on trains. This was before all that.
That word needs to be brought back, by the way. We got to start making hobo more often used word.
They took it away because they said it was offensive, bigoted. Because you could, there's a lot of railroad songs they talk about the hobos.
I love it.
And tramps. That was Little Tramp was Charlie Chaplin, and that come out of that too,
All right, I'm making a note right now, Ed. I'm gonna lead the campaign to make hobo and tramp great again.
I'm sure there's others too. Yeah.
What else you got, man?
I'm just making sure I'm going through my notes here. And Walt learned to read from the McGuffey Reader. That was a Christian textbook. That was where most kids up from the Civil War on learn how to read out of this thing. Okay. And with his dad, he was very strict with. He would take the kids down. He didn't take talking back or anything, but the stuff that we wouldn't consider serious today that would set him off, and he would spank them with a switch, or they say beatings. I don't know, looking back, if it's like that. Yeah, I mean, I grew up that way too.
I had to pick out my own switches, man.
Oh, so did I. I remember my grandma sending me out to pick my own switch. And we look back at, they look back at his dad being this strict guy, but Walt loved his parents, and in Johnny Tremaine, there's a character in there that Johnny Tremaine is the apprentice to, and he's strict, pious, but principled. You think when they first introduce him, he's going to be this real jerk guy, but once Johnny Tremaine gets injured, he's the one that shows him mercy and tells him he can stay with him even though he can no longer work. I mean, that's what his dad was like. And his dad would also play the violin around the house. And there's a scene in Darby O'Gill and Little People where Sean Connery's there and Darby plays the fiddle for him. And that was Walt put that in there because his dad did that. So it wasn't like an abusive relationship. They were just typical family stuff. And when Walt grew up, he quit attending church, but he always took his daughters to Sunday school. But it had to do with how he was raised so strictly. And he put his daughters through Catholic school. and his daughters all said he was devoutly religious, and he wanted them to have religion, but it was Judeo-Christian values is what they grew up with, and his daughters said that it was never Christmas unless they had the nativity set up in their home. I mean, just things like that. You don't even see very many nativity sets in stores now for sale, if you haven't noted.
Right. Well, okay. So when did he write? Because I know he wrote 3 essays, right?
Yeah.
When did he write those?
He
And
wrote,
what were the subject matter on those?
he wrote one in 1949, and it was about his faith, and it was printed in Guidepost magazine. That's like a church magazine, and it tied in with the movie So Dear to My Heart, and that was about what it was like when he grew up. And he would say he said things in it, deeds rather than words. This will sum up where we're going to go. He would say, deeds rather than words express my concept of part of religion that we should play in everyday life. I have watched constantly that my work and highest moral and spiritual grounds are upheld, whether my productions deal with fable or stories of living action. That means live action. I got these. I highlighted some of the things he said.
I love it.
All I ask of myself is to live a good Christian life, and toward the objective, I bend every effort in shaping my personal, domestic, and professional activities and growth. We'll link to 2 of these. The third one I couldn't get a link to, but I can read the whole third one. It's short. This one he did in 1955. It was for a book called My Faith, and it was an anthology where different celebrities wrote articles about their faith. And the other celebrities in this book were actress Lillian Gish, President Herbert Hoover, Conrad Hilton, who founded the Hilton Hotels. And if you didn't know, he was a devoutly Christian guy, and he had a thing with Uncle Sam printed up that he gave the guests of the hotels, and they had a prayer written on it about cool. we forgive us, we don't know what we're doing to our own country, that kind of a thing. And this was in post-war. And Burl Ives was in this, and Harry Truman. And so this is what he said. Walt said in this one. He said, I have a strong personal belief and reliance of the power of prayer for divine inspiration. Every person has his own ideas of the acts of praying for God's guidance, tolerance, and mercy to fulfill his duties and responsibilities. My own concept of prayer is not a plea for special favors or a quick palliation for wrongs knowingly committed. A prayer, it seems to me, implies a promise as well as a request. All prayers, by the humble or the highly placed, has one thing in common, a supplication for strength and inspiration to carry on the best human impulses which should bind us together for a better world. Without such inspiration, we would rapidly deteriorate and finally perish. And Roy was so moved by this thing that he had this prayer printed up, and they gave them out as cards for guests of the studio. It was called Prayer in My Life. And it was also included on the insert of a record album in 1978, music of Walt Disney. And I've been in companies when I was a kid. They would have a Bible in the waiting room. It was, this was even until about 2005. I was in this place. It would have probably been somebody Walt's age, his generation.
I mean, this is the stuff that was the foundation of not only Walt's vision, but his company. And I know we're going to have the evidence later in the conversation, that has been systematically erased by the modern Disney company. And it's just tragic, quite frankly. But I know that I thought this was fascinating. Let's see. I want to put up the picture if I can of Walt with, let's see, I've never tried this. Normally Rob's here to do this. I'll probably screw this up, but looky who Walt was hanging out with here. Let's see if I can get this to work. Boom. Did that go up there?
Yep.
Hey,
I see it. That's the
Billy
Reverend
Graham
Billy
and
Graham.
Walt Disney. How cool is that, man?
And Franklin Graham was with them sometimes when they were together. And he's commented on that when he's confronted things that are going on with Disney today. And one of the stories with Walt and Billy Graham is when Walt took him around Disneyland. Billy Graham said that Walt had built a nice fantasy here. And Walt took him aside, and he said that this isn't a fantasy. This is the real world. All these families of different backgrounds and races, and no prejudice. They're all getting along here. It's outside of Disneyland. That's the fantasy, where everyone's divided and everything. I mean, I'm paraphrasing what he said, but that's
Sure, that's good. Wow, I tell you, I mean, that's just great. So I've heard, and maybe you can address this. What was the connection between, if any, between Walt and Freemasonry?
Well, with the Freemasonry, he wasn't a Freemason. He was I hope I'm pronouncing this right. A de Malay. It was a kid, like a youth group, like the Boy Scouts, but it was founded in Kansas City when he was a boy. It was founded in 1919, I think. And how that got its, affiliated with the Freemasons is these kids were in the community. They wanted to keep them out of trouble, so they want to keep them occupied. And so they formed this group, and they were trying to figure out what the name was. They were involving the kids in with this, the teens, and they were going to tie it in with World War I because that was going on. It just had ended, and Walt had been in World War I. He come back. He was 19, and there was a book in the early 1900s. There were 4 of them. It was by Howard Pyle. They were about King Arthur and his knights, and so they decided, well, they're going to do this thing with the knights, and then they got into the Knights Templar and all that. And it wasn't affiliated with the Freemasons till later. And some people say that it's like their youth group, but some people just say that they get involved with it after they've been a de Malloy. He talks about being a de Malloy in one of those prayer essays that we wrote or we read. And we're going to post. But that was his background with the de Malloys. And this photo that goes around where he's wearing like a cape with all these men, that was taken in 1936 when he went back to Kansas City. And really, he wasn't really he never joined a lodge. Now, Roy was a Freemason, but he resigned from Freemasonry in the late 1950s. And that was around the time of that one prayer I read, but they printed it up on a card. But not to get ahead of the story, but they also, Disney, they made a biblical epic, and that was around the same time. I don't know if that's why Roy left Freemasonry, and but he still, when he died, he donated money to the Shriner Children's Hospital. So I mean, it depends on how you define being involved.
No, I got you.
And the other thing, there's 2 other things that they bring up. They bring up there's this card that says Disneyland Freemasonry Club, but they had all these different clubs at Disneyland, like bowling, and the Freemasons were like considered a men's group. There were a lot of these different men's groups. When I was a kid, they were still around. They would sell flowers or lifesavers and things. I don't remember all their names. Like there was the Lions,
Lions Club.
Yeah, and there's a Moose Club, Elks Club. I mean, that's really what a lot of those. You look at some of the old movies that aren't Disney, like The Ghost and Mr. Chicken. They show the town sign and has all the different groups like that. The Rotary Club. That's really what a lot of people in Middle America. That's what they were signing up for. It wasn't. They thought they were on this big global conspiracy thing, but that's why there was a Freemasonry club at Disneyland. It was because it was for the employees, because it was a club they were involved in. And the third thing that they always bring up, there was at Disneyland, there's Club 33, and how it got started was when Walt did the World's Fair. There were a lot of VIP lounges where they would make deals with other companies. All the World's Fair event things he did, they were all funded by different companies like General Electric, and some of the Disneyland rides were also sponsored by those companies.
Right.
And Disneyland, he wanted to put in one of a lounge like that so he could talk with investors and things. And they didn't sell alcohol at Disneyland. And so when they were building New Orleans Square, he wanted to put this club in there. And because Prohibition ended in 1933, that's why it's called Club 33. It has nothing to do with being 33-degree Mason, anything like that. And it opened in 1967. So Walt was dead when it opened. So I know there's stuff on there about all the stuff that supposedly goes on there, but it's all after he died. So I mean, it's not. He didn't have anything to do with it. He died in 1966, and there some of these rabbit hole things where they connect things. They have Walt doing stuff in the 70s. Well, he'd been long dead, so I mean, people don't know the history, so they fall for it.
Right.
And I mean, he didn't even like attending parties and things. And his hobbies, he had a model train he rode around in his yard all the time, and he built little miniatures in his garage. And that was what he did for fun. He didn't go to parties. So what I mean, when did he have time to be involved in a group like that? Anyway, I mean that's what people. I've been hearing this Freemasonry thing for years, but there's no truth to it. And a lot of the stuff they bring up as evidence that it's stuff that happened after he died in the recent movies. And there's just one of the things they bring up is there's this eye chart in the background of an episode of DuckTales, and it says something like "Ask me about the Freemasons," but it's all written out in the eye chart. This was made in 1989. Well, that season I watched that a couple of years ago, and all through that season there's different things written in the backgrounds on signs and things like that. I mean, goofy stuff. And so what was probably going on with that is the background painters were playing this game. Who could put the most outrageous thing in the backgrounds of these? Because they often would hide things in films. In Beauty and the Beast, there's when Maurice is lost in the woods, there's looks up to see a street sign. And if you make out what the street sign says, they're all cities in modern day California. And Anaheim's on there, and Los Angeles. I mean, other things they would hide in some of the modern ones. They did Beauty and the Beast. Or in Aladdin, they had the Beast from Beauty and the Beast. The Sultan's building a stack of toy animals, and if you look, the Beast is there. In the Hunchback of Notre Dame, there's a scene in one of the songs, and Belle's walking across in the background. And in the same shot, there's the pig from the Lion King, the wild boar there. He's stuffed being sold by a baker or something, and there's the guy selling the magic carpet from Aladdin. It's all in one shot. And the Little Mermaid, there's when King Triton comes into that concert hall, down in the background, Mickey, Donald, and Goofy are in the audience. And if you look at the where Ursula has that contract, if you still through that, there's a Mickey Mouse head in the text. And they'd hide. It's called Hidden Mickeys. It's the whole thing. It's all through Disneyland, Disney World, in the films. They'll just put the three circles together.
Yeah. So okay. So you bring up some of this hidden Easter eggs.
Yeah.
In Disney productions, can you address some of the, I guess, naughty things that have been woven in? I think particularly in the 90s, right?
That's what people say. But I've talked to either people who knew the artists that did those scenes or the artists themselves, and I can debunk a lot of them. Like the priest Little Mermaid, he supposedly has an erection, and well, that's what I don't know how else to put it to be polite, but he goes dearly beloved, but it was his knee. And if you look there's a shot looking down on him, his knees are wobbling. And the guy that did that, he became head of the union of the animators. So he wasn't anyone that would agree with me on anything, but he said it was his knee. Everyone doubled down. That's what it was. And
now go ahead.
I was going to say, it doesn't help. Disney went in and they erased that on the film on the DVD release. So that makes them look guilty.
Right. Hold on a second. But now in The Rescuers, though, there was definitely
that's there. But I was going to get to that.
There in the one. Okay.
I was going to mention the other ones from the 90s that aren't there.
Okay.
In the Lion King, where they say that Simba plops on the dandelions, and it says "sex in the sky."
Yeah.
It doesn't say sex. It says SFX, and that was the special effects department, and that's what it says. And they went and erased that, but that's what it really says.
I mean, SFX is shorthand in the radio business that I'm in. So that's understandable, but why would you even do that? I don't understand.
Well, they do things like that, just to little Easter eggs, like some of you'll get with the characters, but they'll do things like that the special effects department got attention that way.
Yeah, and,
they probably didn't get the attention they wanted, but in Aladdin, they supposedly Aladdin says good teenagers take off their clothes. You remember that one?
Yeah.
Well, he doesn't say that. He says good kitty scat go.
Yeah, and I will say though,
It does sound like it once you have it suggested to you.
exactly,
Yeah.
and that's it. I have actually, because I remember there was, I'm going to try to make this as quick as possible, but 20 years ago I was doing a segment on a radio station in Charleston, and I specifically remember at the time there was a controversy about a doll that was saying something about Allah or something,
I vaguely
and
remember that. Yeah.
right, and so when I presented it, I made sure to tell the audience that this is what the doll is supposedly saying, right?
Yeah.
Because the first time I heard it, not knowing exactly what I was listening for, I couldn't hear it.
Yeah.
But once you suggest that, like you said, that's the perfect word choice. Once you tell people, hey, that's what you're going to hear, then all of a sudden it becomes obvious. So I can understand that with the
And
Aladdin thing.
when they go in and in the DVD releases, they take that stuff out that makes Disney look guilty. I mean, if it wasn't there, they should have just stuck with the guns, back the artists up. But they threw them under the bus. That what you just said there about the doll reminds me of one that there was a Tarzan doll that got recalled. If you look this up, it's on YouTube somewhere. Conan O'Brien did a segment of it. There was a Tarzan doll, and if you remember Tarzan, his hands are kind of like that, and they're cupped. And you push the button on his back, and he would do this and go, the scream. And they recalled that doll, but someone had to think about that.
Yeah, we are a sick society, aren't we?
And no one that was making it thought of it. And the other one that always comes up is the Little Mermaid movie poster, and it's supposed to have a penis in the. I mean, I can say that, right? I'm not.
Sure. Yeah, I just wish I wish I had these photos up for you. Shoot.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. We can link to them. I'll link to them.
Okay.
But the guy that did that, he was friends with my my publisher that passed away, and he's a Messianic Jew, and he told me, and I believe him, that he just went with the model packet they gave him. He wasn't even thinking about that. He didn't know about it till the kids in his youth group told him about it, where it was getting in the news several years later, and he's quoted in articles that he did not put that in the palace tower. But even that's been digitally erased in the modern age.
And like you said, it makes him look guilty.
Yeah, and he did two versions of that poster. And the castle is the model sheet they gave him, and that's what he went by. But the Rescuers one, that one's there, and I've talked to people who worked there at the time, and what we think what happened was, whoever was running, it would be easy to find out who this is because they keep records of who was running the cameras and everything. They just cut the picture of this woman and stuck her in the window. She's only there for like 2 frames when they're flying by on the albatross. But that scene was seen every week in the opening of The Wonderful World of Disney for several years. So they probably thought, well, look what I did. I got this nude picture at the beginning of the show every week, and no one knew it was there. They didn't find out it was there till the second video release of it in the late 90s, like 98, 97, 99, somewhere in there. And they recalled it and it made a big deal. But that one's there. But you also got to keep in mind what the animators were like. They were always like college frat boys. Even back in Walt's time, they would do things like you'd be working at your desk and they'd stick a match in your shoe and give you a hot foot. Or they'd have squirt guns and they would squirt your crotch so it looked like you wet yourself.
Okay.
They put a tack in the chair, water over the door. There's this one story. There was an animator there from England, and he had fruit cocktail every day for lunch. And they would pick on him because he was from England. So what they started to do is they went and got other cans of food in the same kind of cans. They took the labels and started switching them. So they took his fruit cocktail label and they put it on vegetables, canned vegetables, and they would just keep messing around with him. And this went on for like a year and a half. And then there was
what are they trying to do to this guy?
Well, he even got into Ripley's Believe It or Not that they were switching the labels in this canning company. And then he got one that was the canned meat. And that one really blew him away. He finally caught him and they figured out what was going on. But they would do things like this. And Walt didn't care as long as it ended up into his films. And but they also would do things like they would play jokes on each other. And one of the jokes that they did in the 50s, it was Mark Davis and Ward Kimball. They did a little 15-second animated pencil test of Tinkerbell and Jiminy Cricket in sexual encounter, we'll say. And what they would do with it is when they would get new hires, they would play the dailies, and they would stick this thing, this X-rated video, the film, in with the stuff, so they would get the guy's reaction, or the animator's reaction, because you wouldn't believe you saw what you just saw, and then they would swear them to secrecy afterwards. Don't tell Walt, and Walt never found out. And
oh my gosh,
that went on until the early 70s when the 9 old men left. But this was a very well-known story. It was confirmed to me by someone who was there.
The 9 old men.
And he asked me, well, they were named after the Supreme Court. They were called the 9 old men when FDR backed the court. And so Walt called his 9 animators that were the top guys the 9 old men. God. Yeah, we'll have to do a thing on who they were too. But they would do things like that, just keep themselves occupied. And there's another story, and this wasn't in the official Disney history for years, but it happened. It's out on some of their official histories now. It's known as the Snow White Orgy. And what they did, what happened was Walt held a party at the end of Snow White for all the animators, and they rented out this hotel. And the animators just went nuts. They were chasing girls, and the girls were chasing the men. And there was one case where an animator walked off of a balcony drunk and landed in a tree. And Walt and his wife stayed there the first night. And when they got up in the morning, saw this carnage, Walt got mad and they left. They never talked about it. They never held another party like that. And if you talked about it and Walt heard you, you got fired. But that was what that was always known as. And it wasn't in the official histories until recent years.
And this was so a lot of this stuff, was obviously happening, like you alluded to. It was like a frat house in many respects.
And some of the other studios are worse. The Looney Tunes were made at a place called Termite Terrace, and they would do even more wild things than that.
My goodness!
But that's what the animators. Most of them were men, and they would.
So Walt just kind of tolerated it, huh?
Well, as long as they got their work done, he didn't care. As long as it stayed out of his films, he didn't care. And that's not like today where they insert stuff. You played that clip this week of that woman that talks about her exclusive gay agenda and the.
Oh yeah.
That happens now. It wasn't happening then.
Right. So I guess I understand exactly. So back then it was kind of like good-natured frat house type stuff, whereas today it's like, we're coming for your kids. It used to be behind the scenes, we'll keep it there with us. Now it's like we're out in front here.
There's also one case where the Sherman brothers, who wrote the songs for a lot of the Disney's stuff, they were writing a song for The Happiest Millionaire, and they had the lyric in it FOB, and Walt was in the hallway and he thought they said SOB, and he come in and yelled and screamed at him that the term SOB does not belong in a Walt Disney film. And they were like, no, FOB.
Wow.
That's how he was. He swore and stuff around the studio, but not around the female employees and things. I mean, he was well mannered and everything, but you wouldn't know that from what they say about him now.
Right. I love this picture though. Let's see if I can get this screen share to work again. Magic. Did it show up there? Yay.
Yeah, it's there.
I love this picture of Walt. We use this for the thumbnail, and it's just. I mean, that's a cool picture. Explain Walt's relationship there in the park with just his almost routine in the mornings.
He would frequently stay in the park. He had an apartment above the firehouse, and he would get up in the morning before they opened. Sometimes he'd drive the fire truck around the park. He would be alone. There's photos of him where he's walking alone at the castle. He was looking at things around the park, and he was also probably doing some of those prayers that we were referring to.
Right.
In one of those essays about the prayers, he talks about how important he took his position in influencing children that go to see his films, and they had to be of the highest moral standards. And so was his park. Everything in the company all filtered through him. It wasn't like other studios where they had a board that would decide what movies they're going to make. Jack Warner didn't filter all the scripts through him, but with Walt, everything filtered through him. It always reflected what he thought should be in the films. That's what the Disney touch was. And there were times where they had finalized a script, and he would decide at the last minute they were going to change something. like a character dying, or he would add another character into the film. Just different things like that. But that's how he was. He was always
He was definitely hands-on.
yeah, he was hands-on in everything he did. But he still surrounded himself with people that he trusted to do things without him overseeing everything. He would still have the final say when it comes through. But things like the comics and the books and everything, he didn't really get involved in that. But they would hire people they would trust wouldn't hide things in their comics or do something wrong. Carl Barks started at the Disney Studios, but when he did the comics, he was working for different comic book companies. But they try, Carl Barks created Uncle Scrooge, and Uncle Scrooge eventually transferred over into animation, and that was the final short that Walt oversaw. It's a really good short. Teaches about finances, Scrooge McDuck and money. And I mean, everyone in Congress should see this short. It talks about balancing the budget and inflation.
And what's the name of the short again?
Scrooge McDuck and money. That was the first time he was fully animated as a character. He had a little bit part in the Mickey Mouse Club in the opening. But
before I forget, and this is something that last time we spoke, you had alluded to, that the original Mickey Mouse, Steamboat Willie, all that's now in public domain.
It's all public domain now.
Last week.
That reminds me of something else with the Freemason stuff. Some people point to this. There's this cartoon clip out there where Mickey Mouse is putting holes in cheese with an erection. It is not in any Mickey Mouse cartoon, but they're the Steamboat Willie designs. And people really believe that this was a real Disney cartoon. It's not. Their characters roll off model and everything as well. But you got to be careful when you look at some of the stuff people put out there and they say that this was something Walt Disney made. And they'll attribute animated cartoons that he had. There were different studios, and they'll say Walt made this, and he did not make a lot of these cartoons that they're attributing to him.
And I'm glad you're mentioning that, because that ties in nicely to something in the chat there the Wombat Mommy made just a few minutes ago. There's going to be so much Mickey Mouse related pornography now. That people are going to.
First day there was. They did a game about it was Nazis with Mickey Mouse.
Okay. So there's going to be even more of this stuff now that you're going to have to discern.
What I think's great about it is those films now people can see them. They can't ban them because there's some. As we go through the next few years where this stuff's getting released, a lot of this stuff Bob Iger said that they're not going to release again because they'll say that it's racist or sexist or all the other ists. Roy put them all out on DVD before he died, and Iger regretted that. Now they're all going to be out there. And that's good because people now can discover them and see the real history.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously, faith played a big role in the life of Walt Disney. We talked about that, his essays, his upbringing. He really got a lot of this. And again, this is something that modern day Disney does not want acknowledged. But talk to us about how Walt's faith really was integrated into so many of the films.
So many of them. There was they did just basic ones, like they did Noah's Ark as a Silly Symphony short, and they also revisited it again in the 60s. They did a stop motion Noah's Ark, and it's just a basic thing with the animals. But would they do that now? They put a Noah's Ark short in the Fantasia 2000, but it was just a basic thing. But one of the shorts he did with Mickey Mouse, it's one of my favorite Mickey Mouse shorts, probably the second best Christmas short ever made. It's called Mickey's Good Deed. And Mickey sells Pluto to buy gifts for his greatest enemy, for the kids of his greatest enemy. Because the dad's in prison because he's a crook.
He sells Pluto, though. You can't sell Pluto, bro.
Well, Pluto gets sold to a wealthy family, and the kid abuses Pluto's, and the dad blames Pluto, and they throw Pluto out of the house.
Oh, what?
But Pluto had a turkey tied to his tail because the kid's a little brat, and so Mickey eats the turkey with Pluto at the little campfire. Mickey was a lot like Charlie Chaplin, Little Tramp, that kind of a thing. That's a lot of those Mickey shorts. They're based on the silent shorts.
Okay.
Of the live action silent shorts, so, like Buster Keaton and all that. But he did things like that all through the shorts, but also when he started into the animated features, if you remember Snow White, there's a scene in Snow White where she prays at the bedside for the Lord to bless the 7 little men that's been so kind to her. And you wouldn't see that now. When they did a similar scene in Lilo and Stitch, they had to fight for that. remember Lilo and Stitch, she prays for God to send an angel to keep their family together, and Stitch arrives. So and it ends up that the prayer was answered, not the way you would think, but they had to fight to put that in there. But they got to do that because Walt did it in Snow White. And when Geppetto wishes on the star, he's not really sitting by the window and praying. He's kneeling and he's got his hands like that in prayer. So it's really a kind of prayer. As the Disney universe where they have all the magic and everything, God exists there as well, because you see it in that. And the pinnacle of all the animated features, and I found this in one of my vintage books that come out in 1942. Fantasia is about man's search for God, and each segment in that film, that's what it all comes to when you put it all together. The first sequence in it was the toccata and fugue, and if you look at it, it's all abstract, and that's supposed to be like the mind searching, and it's all about the different things that man replaces God with as he searches for God. And like the Nutcracker, it's nature. It's worshiping nature. Rite of Spring is about evolutionary theory, and that's become like a religion for a lot of people. The Sorcerer's Apprentice, Mickey plays God. He's moving the universe around with the magic abilities. And in Sorcerer's Apprentice, the sorcerer is known as Yen Sid, and it's Disney backwards. And if you look, there's a part where he looks like Walt. Walt was always known for when he was concerned or skeptical about something, he'd raise one eyebrow, and the wizard raises his eyebrow. I mean, the animators would put stuff. They'd put caricatures of Walt in some of the shorts. The Pastoral Symphony, that's about the false gods, because it's about the Roman, Greek gods, that kind of thing. And then it would finally come to a Night on Bald Mountain, where there's Chernabog up on the mountain with all the little demons and everything. And that's how that ends is the light arrives, and like God, let there be light. God said, let there be light. And that's when they have the Ave Maria, and all the monks are going through with the candles. Originally that was going to go through a church, but Walt said that nature was created by God. That's where God exists in his own creation. So they're going through a forest. But I have books, modern books on Fantasia's history, and this was never in any of those modern histories. And the book is from 1942, and it's in this.
That is fascinating.
I mean, Fantasia came out in 1940, so this was the year after Fantasia was released. So it's fresh on their mind.
Yeah.
And it made me appreciate the movie in a whole different way.
Yeah, I bet. Is that one of the books you showed me off air last week?
Yeah, that's okay. One of the ones.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I like that book a lot.
That's one of the oldest ones that I've ever seen for Disney history. And I didn't even know it existed.
So, obviously, the modern Disney Corporation is light years from Walt's vision and the kind of productions that he brought us. Let me ask you this. I remember watching the Walt Disney movie that Tom Hanks did. I just don't remember much from it for some reason. As
Which
I'm
one?
Sitting here.
He's done a couple of them. He did.
Tom Hanks has?
Yeah, Splash was the first.
No. I mean the movie about Walt's life.
Oh, Saving Mr.
How
Banks.
accurate is that?
It's
Dear
not,
Mr. Banks. Yeah.
Walt
not
wasn't
at all,
even. Walt wasn't there because he didn't want to be trapped in anything Mrs. Travers would put him into to make Mary Poppins. So, he told the Shermans and everybody, I'm going to my summer home. He had another home. I think it was in Lake Tahoe. I might have the city wrong, but he went, or Palm Springs. He went there for 2 weeks while she was at the studio. So he wasn't even there, but how she is portrayed in the film, that is accurate, where they would say she was a witch. She put in her will that the Shermans couldn't have anything to do with any Mary Poppins revivals or sequels, and that's why they were never involved in anything with Mary Poppins. She hated the movie. And that whole thing where they tried to say that she wrote the movie or the book to be about her dad, that wasn't her. That was the Sherman brothers that figured that out. They made see this was a big secret for years, that Mary Poppins, everybody thinks is about this magical nanny that does all these things, and it's really about the dad, because he's the one that changes in the film. And Walt saw himself in that with his daughters. That's why the story spoke to him about that. And it also, Mary Poppins isn't the one that changes the dad. It's Bert. And you think about that through the whole film, Dick Van Dyke's this goofy character, like her sidekick.
Mm-hmm.
But it's when he sings that song with Mr. Banks about focusing on work and your kids grow up and you don't spending time with them, and then when you want to spend time with them, they're gone. That's
right.
what got through to him, and you learn. That's when you realize he's Mary Poppins' equal. It's through that song.
And by the way, I did see a couple questions here. I've highlighted them to go back. If you guys have questions for Ed, I can't promise. I'm going to put you on the spot though, Ed. But I can't promise that he'll have the answers. But if you have questions as we go along, we'll try to revisit some of these toward the end of the conversation. So please don't give up. If you type a question or whatever, we'll come back to those at the end.
Chances are I know the answer, and if I don't offhand, we can.
I know.
Look it up.
So let me go back in time a little bit here. Can we talk about the Mickey Mouse Club some?
Well, yeah. That's not back in time. That's ahead. I still had more films we can go through too.
Oh, well, let's go through more films, man.
Yeah,
okay, I don't want to cut you short here.
Well, it's okay.
Got plenty of time.
Well, I also didn't get to tell you when we were talking about his parents. When I was telling you about how he loved his parents, when they ended, he blamed himself for their deaths. And that was through his whole life. When he had that nervous breakdown I mentioned before, last time. What he did was they bought a house for the parents and had them come out to California to stay out there, and the furnace malfunctioned in the house, and he sent the studio repairman to fix it, and it still malfunctioned.
That's right.
And his mom died from the malfunction. His dad was permanently scarred from that, and Walt never would talk about it even with his own family. And one time a secretary brought it up, and he cried, and he said, "Don't ever bring it up again." And I mean, that stuck with him his whole life. But, I was saying how harsh his dad was. He still took care of his parents and everything like that. Honor your father and mother. Yeah. And this was around the time Fantasia came out. So that's when he had the second nervous breakdown. And part of that was because Fantasia failed. And then when you think about it, Disney was considered upscale art at that time, like the Masters and everything. That was being shown in museums, the art from the films. Artists from all over the world would come to Disney studio to meet him or collaborate with him. And that's what Fantasia was this high art thing. And that's how it ended up having this theme of man's search for God. And he only finds God when he confronts evil. And that speaks to the time we're in now. and he put this in the film in World War II. This was a theme through a lot of the films. There's one that's a short. You can find it online because I looked before we came on. It's called Education for Death. And it's based on a book about what would happen if the Nazis took over America. And it's a lot like stuff you hear the left wants to do today. But there's a scene where the Bible's replaced with Mein Kampf. And there was a poster made around the time where there's a hand putting a dagger through the Bible. And that's from this book. But Walt made an animated version of it. And there's one scene where there's a crucifix with Christ on the wall of a church. And the flames come up and it becomes a dagger with a swastika behind it. I mean, this is, real serious imagery. And that's what was, people realized that's what was at stake at World War II. And some people even thought that was the end times of Revelation there. And, it turned out not to be, but people realized this was a battle between good and evil. And they would put it in the films at the time. And that's why we should be able to see that stuff, because you understand the mindset of the time in the history. And some of the other films, the original version of Song of the South was going to be an animated feature. The thread that was going to go through the whole movie was Uncle Remus was going to have the animals built, the carnivores and the herbivores. They were going to build a church, so they all got along. And there were songs for this that I have the song sheet music. I'm not going to sing them. I just have the titles.
Well, that's too bad.
Yeah,
well, I thought we were going to get a treat.
No, that's okay. Well, one of them is "The Lord Looks After His Children." That was the title of one of the songs. Like a Heavenly Dream. So Walt wasn't hostile towards religion because that was going to be a thread in Song of the South when it was going to be fully animated. And even for someone that didn't go to church, he was going to have them build a church. In the Three Caballeros, there's this scene where it's called the Mexican tradition of Las Posadas, where the children go from house to house mimicking the journey of Mary and Joseph trying to find shelter for where they would have Jesus.
Mhm.
Now, it was very, very steeped in Catholic culture in Latin America. Now, a few years ago, they did that movie Coco,
Right.
and there's no Catholic imagery in Coco.
That's a good point.
I
Yeah.
mean, and that's a big part of that culture. And they always
Mhm.
when they accepted the Oscars for that, they turned the acceptance speeches all into about illegal immigration and Trump. And I wish they hadn't have. I mean, it's a nice fantasy story, but
Mhm.
even with that, even to do that film is about illegal immigration because the one guy wants to come over to the land of living and he can't because he doesn't have an ID. And they have an immigrant. So why would you do that at the Oscars? Make this about Trump hates Mexicans.
Uh-huh.
They did. You go look at these speeches. They every
Yeah.
acceptance speech they did that. And
It's a shame.
in another package feature where they did Johnny Appleseed, and some say that's the most Christian short that they ever did, and it was based on this book.
I love it.
It was from about 1900, and not the same author did another book that Walt did a film on called Gray Friars Bobby, but in Johnny Appleseed, it's inspired by the real guy. Now Johnny Appleseed, he was a Swedenborgist, the real Johnny Appleseed. He wasn't really a Christian, but he did what he did because he was spreading his gospel around the country. And I know a lot about the real Johnny Appleseed. I won't get into it today, but the song in it was "The Lord is Good to Me," and that was used in Bible schools for years. And I met people where they didn't even know it was from this cartoon, this song.
Oh, wow.
And there was a scene that was cut from Johnny Appleseed because he couldn't afford to do it because this was when they were doing those package features after World War II. And the cut scene was Johnny Appleseed comes upon a scene where some American Indians have captured some settlers. They burnt the cabin down and everything. And they're going to kill these settlers. And Johnny Appleseed approaches them. He doesn't have any weapons or anything. He just has a Bible. And he tells them to put away their weapons and everything. And he starts quoting a couple of scriptures to them. And the Indians had all their weapons raised at him. And the Indians realized that a man that would approach him like that, he must have a powerful God behind him. And they all kneel down and start worshiping God. And that was in the short. It's in the children's LP that came out at the time, but they couldn't put that in the. It was and they in the record they sang with a choir, "Blessed are the peacemakers" out of the Bible.
What year was that released? Do you know?
I think it was. I mixed those ones up. I think it was 1946 or 5, somewhere in there. 47.
Wow.
And when he did "So Dear to My Heart," that's a film that he wrote about in the Guidepost essay. That was a lot about what it was like where he grew up. And if you want to know what it was like in early 1900 America or rural America at that time, this is what it was like. And the Bible's all through that film. The grandmother's Christian faith, and it's about this boy that has a black lamb, and the lamb gets lost, and he goes looking for it, and they end up going to a fair, and there's prayer in this thing, but they also have a montage with his scrapbook, and you'll see some of biblical vignettes animated in it, as well as American history. And if you know Braveheart, Robert Bruce is in there.
You need to answer that?
No, the machine will pick it up. It's probably just a telemarketer.
Yeah, right? Okay, that's cool. Well, here, let me mute you for a second while it finishes up. Oh, sorry. Wait, I don't want people to hear your answering machine message. You can give you a little bit of privacy. Why don't you give me a thumbs up when you're done with the? Did they hang up? Okay, here we go.
I'm gonna I'll plug it next time.
Ed, this is your doctor. The tests are back.
Yeah.
If you would like to.
Yeah. I have to go next week. So.
Okay, so here we go. Let me ask you this. Well, I mean, is it safe to talk about the Mickey Mouse Club yet? Because I just want to put this picture up, and then we can come back to this.
We can talk about the Mickey Mouse Club. Go back to the live action films because the rest I have are live action ones.
Look at this. I gotta get this picture up here. Is that up there now?
Yeah.
Yeah. There we go. Okay. Tell us about that individual and why he's important to Disney.
He's very important. His name is Jimmie Dodd, and he was he was a singer, songwriter, dancer, all these different things. He had a heart condition, so he couldn't be in World War II. So he joined the USO, traveled over the country. He also wrote the anthem for Washington, D.C. I didn't know they had an anthem until I saw that. He toured with Louis Prima, who later was a Disney star. He was on early television. He was a Western actor. And he ran the Hollywood Bible Society with his wife, and he was a youth pastor.
Oh, wow.
And there was a point where in his career, he in the early 50s, he and his wife prayed together because they were deciding if he was going to get out of doing movies because he was just having a dry spell. Mm. And he got a call that Disney needed a song about a pencil, the pencil song. And
Can you imagine just getting a call like that?
Now, his wife said that he liked getting calls like that because he was very good getting assigned a job like that and then coming up with a song. Mm-hmm. And he went to the studio with this song that he wrote, and they took him to go see Walt. Walt would always look ahead to. You would be there playing this song. He'd be thinking about what else he was going to do with you. He would always see your potential, and he knew his background as a youth pastor and head of the Bible Society, and he decided he would be the perfect person to be the daily face of the Mickey Mouse Club, to be the head guy of the Mickey Mouse Club. And he got this job because he was a youth pastor and head of the Bible Society in Hollywood.
I mean, if anybody's watching that's in a position of authority in a company, if you're a supervisor or in a role where you can help other people succeed, what a great lesson right there.
Oh, Walt did this all the time.
Right. So instead of seeing Jimmie as, hey, I need you to come in here and do this. Okay, the job's done. Move on with your life. That's really wise of him and a true sign of a leader to see the potential in what other projects I have in the back of my mind. You know, I just
signed him for a 7-year contract on the spot, but Jimmie stayed for 10.
Oh, right. So, and what year are we talking about that Jimmie became associated with Disney?
1954 or 5, somewhere in there, because the Mickey Mouseketeers, they were at the opening of Disneyland. Well, we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah, a lot going on with that.
Yeah, a couple minutes here, because Jimmie Dodd and his wife, they saw the Mickey Mouse Club as a ministry, and he wrote a lot of songs for it. And these are some of the song titles from the official album of the Mickey Mouse Club. They were in the episodes. You can't find the songs on YouTube anymore. I tried really hard to find footage of him doing this on the show, and I couldn't find it. Now, one of the songs, "Do What the Good Book Says." Mm-hmm. Cleanliness is godliness. He would sing daily proverbs. And there was another one called the Pioneer's Prayer. One of the songs, this is the lyrics. "The race is won by running. There is no other way. And if you keep on running, you will win one day." And that's a lot of people give up on things that they're doing. And they did 332 episodes of the Mickey Mouse Club, and they would do reoccurring Bible segments. Jimmie Dodd didn't have any children. He ended up being seen like all the children of America were his children. And Walt would send him to go places to perform around the country to tie in with the show. They would have to do extra performances because they would just get mobbed, all these kids. Mm-hmm. And when they went into syndication, they sent Jimmie over to other countries. He was in Australia for 2 years, and but he got to minister to all these kids because of this. Because these songs are ministry songs; they were Bible school songs, and here he was doing them on a TV show 5 days a week. And the popular kids show at the time was Howdy Doody. That started in 1948. People don't know Howdy Doody today, but Back to the Future 3, there's a clip of Howdy Doody. It's Howdy Doody time. It was a very different kind of show, but the Mickey Mouse Club is what forced Howdy Doody into cancellation. It toppled Howdy Doody.
1955 to 1996. I see.
Well, that's the Mickey Mouse Club, the original one. It went from 55 to about 59. It only ended because ABC wanted to do it more cheaply, and Walt said that greed is what killed the Mickey Mouse Club. But he still had it in syndication. And
okay.
I might as well. I want to get in about the other guy that was he was the other head of the Mickey Mouse Club. He was like Jimmie's sidekick. Mm-hmm. And there was Roy he was a over 6 foot tall, 300-pound guy. He was like a big kid. He was known as the Musketeer. And he was the 15th employee Walt ever hired. He was all the way back from 1928. And when Walt went into his office one day and he said, "You're kind of fat and funny looking. We'll give you this job as being on the..." But Roy loved Walt. And Roy is the one who designed the Mickey Mouse Club ears that they all wore. And they're still, now today they made him into a political statement with a lot of the things they'll stick on those hats.
Mm-hmm.
But he was a gag man at Disney, and he did a lot of gags in the films. And there was a time where he got fired. No one told Walt about it, and Walt made them go get him back. And he kept him in there was like Walt's wing of the studio, and Roy had a spot right there in the wing. When the Sherman brothers came there to work, he was right next door, and he was always slipping cartoons under the door of things he would overhear going on in their office. I mean, when that FOB SOB story, he slid a cartoon under their door of that. And when Roy died, he wanted to be buried in his Mickey Mouse Club ears and his shirt that said Roy over the front. He died in 1976. But there was another case of Walt taking care of someone like that.
Remind me when Roy Disney died.
I think 1971.
Okay.
Funny you brought him up. I've got his book. I was going to show you this.
Ta-da.
Yeah.
Awesome.
This is how much I know. In the background here, you see there's storyboards on the wall. That is from a cut character from the Jungle Book, and I recognized it. And nobody ever talks about it. It's Rocky the Rhino.
Oh, hang on.
I hadn't planned on showing that. Rocky the Rhino was cut out of the Jungle Book. He was going to be in the scene with the vultures, and he sang along. And Walt cut him out of the movie. And you'll see that character in some of the vintage stuff. That's Walt and Roy there next to him. Mm-hmm. Roy was 7 years older than Walt.
Wow.
But
that's cool stuff.
Roy always tried to get everything done, but he was the money guy. That he was real good at that with the finance, and Walt come up with the ideas, and that's why the partnership worked. But what happened with Jimmie Dodd was he also did some gospel albums for Disney, and this is kind of an embarrassment to the historians because they don't want to talk about it. Some of the titles: the Mouska Hymns, favorite hymns for family singing. Jimmie Dodd sings his family hymns, or sings his favorite hymns. And the last one I think he did with a different company was Bible Story Time with Jimmie Dodd. I shared a link on my page about that. And what's funny about this is Joy Behar, she made that comment a few years ago that people who pray are mentally ill, and she's a Disney employee.
That's right.
And see, Jimmie had what happened was when they finished the Mickey Mouse Club, Jimmie had blood cancer. And a couple weeks after he finished filming all of his stuff for the Mickey Mouse Club, he did some segments for syndication and everything. He passed away. He was 54 years old.
Yeah.
So it was like God called him home when his ministry was done. Because his wife emphasized they really saw that as a ministry. And I think the reason you don't see the Mickey Mouse Club in reruns anymore is because all this Christian stuff is in it. And I wished I had tapes of all this stuff. There's 330 some episodes of it, 332 episodes. And so why isn't that on Disney Plus? And that's why I think it's not on Disney Plus, because that's kind of an embarrassment to them. And I mean, they'll comment now there's no minorities in the cast and things like that. But the Mickey Mouse Club was popular in the South and Black communities. So people didn't think about things like that back then.
I would love to show that video if now you think is a good time from the opening of Disneyland, because you talk about how modern Disney is embarrassed by its
they really are
by its spiritual roots and the foundation in Judeo-Christian values. And I was just stunned in a good way when you sent the 1955 video. And it features a young Ronald Reagan.
Yes.
Fresh-faced Ronald Reagan at the microphone in front of the camera. One of Walt's friends. And this is, so let me see if I can do this correctly here. I'm going to try to share this video. It's a couple minutes long here. Okay, where did it go? I knew this was going to happen. I knew at this moment of truth.
Well, I can set it
It
up
was.
and tell me when you're ready. I'm sure, as you people that listen to Glenn Beck's show, they know that Glenn got the plans to Disneyland that Walt pitched to the bankers. And there's this on Main Street, USA. Walt was going to have the little church around the corner. His original plan was pastors from different denominations would come and they'd give sermons. The reason that wasn't built was because his nephew was Reverend Glenn D. Pewter. You'll see him in this clip. He advised Walt that it would probably be considered disrespectful to have a church.
Hang on, sorry.
Yeah.
I got it to play. Yay!
That's okay.
Go ahead, finish your thought there.
The nephew told him that it would probably be considered disrespectful to have a church and a for-profit enterprise like a theme park, and that's why they didn't put they charged a gate admission fee. That's why they didn't put that in the park. It was respect for religion.
Dang. Okay, so here is opening day, 1955, Disneyland, out in California. You're going to see Ronald Reagan throw it down to the festivities down on Main Street, where you will hear from Walt, his nephew, and the governor of California.
Yeah, governor of California. Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Center of Main Street, ready for the official opening ceremony. All activity on Main Street has ceased. Those carriages which have lined up for the parade to follow are full of celebrities. Walt Disney, Governor Knight, the mayor of Anaheim, and other dignitaries are talking to the three chaplains representing the Protestant, Catholic, and Jewish faiths. And now, Walt Disney will step forward to read the dedication of Disneyland. The military chaplains representing the various creeds are present, but all were agreed that
I have known Walt Disney for many years and have long been aware of the spiritual motivation in the heart of this man who has dreamed Disneyland into being. Let us join with him then in dedicating these wonder-filled acres to those things dear to his heart and ours, to understanding and goodwill among men, laughter for children, memories for the mature, and aspiration for young people everywhere. And beyond the creeds that would divide us, let us unite in a silent prayer that this and every worthy endeavor may prosper at God's hand. Let us bow in prayer. Amen.
That was Walt Disney's nephew, the Reverend Glenn D. Pewter. And now, is the Honorable Goodwin Knight, Governor of
Reagan,
California.
Mr. and Mrs. Disney, Reverend clergy, and my fellow Americans. Today is a wonderful day, and all America is proud as we open Disneyland. This is a wondrous community with all the charm of the old world and all of the progress and ingenuity of the new world. Yes, this is a wonderful place for children and grown-ups alike. There are replicas of every town and city in America, stores, libraries, schools, just like your hometown, all built by American labor and American capital under the belief that this is a God-fearing and a God-loving country. And as we dedicate this flag now, we do it with the knowledge that we are the fortunate ones to be Americans, and that we extend to everyone, everywhere, the great ideals of Americanism, brotherhood, and peace on earth, goodwill towards men.
Amazing.
And whenever they do the reenactments, they don't ever do the prayer anymore. And that Reverend Pewter died in 2011. There was no response from the Disney company or anything like that, and the fans didn't know who he was. He was there opening day. And another thing I found out about him when I was preparing for this is in the 90s, when Disney was getting boycotted by all the Christian groups, Reverend Pewter and his wife, they cashed in some of their Disney stock and they built a church in Celebration. That was a town that Disney built in Florida, if you remember. And it was the first church that was built there. They would never say how much they donated to build it, but they wanted to make a statement from the Disney family that they didn't approve of what was going on back then, 30 years ago.
Yeah,
almost 30 years ago.
This decay of the company started long before the last few years. That's for sure.
Yeah, and we'll get into some of that next time too.
Yeah. Okay, so and there was a great picture here that I wanted to get up here from that. I think it's from the same right, the same opening where the Marines were there.
Yeah, they had the Marines there, the military, different branches. They were all there.
Cool.
And they did. Walt had dedications at all of the different lands in Disneyland too. It was, and if you look at pictures of what it was like doing this broadcast live, there's never been anything like it. They've got cables running all through the buildings and the sky, through the windows and everything. And then just think of how great, you can't see them there, but just think how crazy. It's not like now where we can broadcast through the air. It was all done analog.
Right. I love that. The 48th state flag.
Well, yeah.
That's cool.
We didn't have 50 yet.
No, still 4 years away from that. That's cool. Okay, so where are we going next in our little adventure here?
Well, I can either do some of the live action films, or I can talk about Christ in the parks.
You know what? Do the Christ in the parks, because I want to play the video of. I'm so excited to play this, and
I'm excited. I found it. That was.
I know you really worked hard to find this video clip we're about to play. From there used to be, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, a live nativity scene in this is Disneyland or Disney World. They both had them. The clip we've got from 1983, but it was still the same program as they would do in the 50s. And so you want me to set it up, or do you just want to play it? Yeah, set this up, and then we're gonna play that, and then I want you to, after we play the clip, explain why we no longer have it. So set it up first here.
Well, there was also the Candlelight Processional that went at the same time, but I'll do that afterwards. But Walt decided they needed to have a live nativity there. These only were there for a couple days. It was just like a weekend event kind of thing. Okay. And what they would do was they would do the live nativity, and they had this program that was all put together with the hymns and everything and narration. And then they would. This was common in America. Now they have people get sued for separation of church and state and all that doing live nativities. But when they built the Matterhorn in the late 50s, they mounted a 24-foot tall star on top of the Matterhorn. They would do it like a ceremony that Santa Claus put this here so the wise men could find baby Jesus at Disneyland. And that star was on the top of the Matterhorn for Christmas till 1971. And the reason they quit putting it out there was a mechanism that made the star rotate, and they didn't want to fix it, so they just quit putting the star in the Matterhorn. That was the highest point at Disneyland at that time. But and when they built Disney World, I think it opened in 71 or 72. All of the stuff that they did at Disneyland was ported over to Disney World, and this is what we're going to see here.
Okay. All right.
This is a home movie somebody filmed and put up, so it's not a professional Disney release.
And if they hadn't have recorded this, we would have what? No video record.
There's no record of that I've ever seen. That's.
Oh gosh, here we go. This is incredible.
And that's only part of it. It went for like a half hour, that video, and it's the whole show. And you can't see the detail.
This isn't in the front of a mega church somewhere in your community. This is at a Disney park. 1983. When did the nativity scene at Disney stop?
The late 80s, early 90s. It was Eisner pulled that out because they said that it was divisive. They were trying to be multicultural, PC. I guess it was known as being PC back then. And that's when a lot of this stuff went away. It was in the 90s with Eisner. That was one reason people started complaining about Eisner, because he was taking things out of the park and the quality was going down from what it was when Walt was there. And they ultimately kicked Roy out of the company, and that there was this whole campaign to save Disney and everything. We'll get into that in the future. But there were other things they did in the parks too. The other major thing is the Candlelight Processional. And how that started was Walt was in his apartment above the firehouse one day, and he said Disneyland really needs to have some Christmas carolers. And he contacted Dr. Charles Hurt. He was the choir director. He was leading the authority on choirs in California. And they got together and they started planning this show. It was going to be a Candlelight Processional. And it evolved over all the years that they did this. And what it ultimately became was they would march down from the castle, and they would all set up in front of the train station, and they would do a half hour to a 45-minute, like a church service almost. They would sing hymns and things. And there would be a celebrity host that would host this. And I've got a list of some of the celebrities. They were all big celebrities at the time. You had Gregory Peck, Rock Hudson, Cary Grant, Charlton Heston, John Wayne, Jimmy Stewart, Ed Asner even did this. And he's not a conservative, and it wasn't considered conservative to do hymns and things at Christmas time. Now they still do a version of the Candlelight Processional, but they've watered it down. And there's some of these people recorded. They're on YouTube, and I looked at the one from last year. Brie Larson hosted it, and for years there was this poem in it we're going to link to that it was called One Solitary Life. And it's about how Christ affected the world, and it's more than any other human being, any other man. They're trying to make the point that he was the Son of God, because it was just this one life that affected all humanity to this day. And this poem was there right along, and for when they started. It was a very famous poem. It was in a lot of Christmas shows, even the Radio City Music Hall. They always had this at the end of the Radio City Music Hall. I saw the Christmas episodes of Sonny and Cher when they had their shows. They would even do this. And that was in the 70s. They took that out in 2014. They said there wasn't time for it in the show. But I noticed with Brie Larson, when she did it, she did some monologue about inclusivity and love is love and all this kind of stuff. And this is the only time she was crying and breaking down in the thing. Like, this was her religion she was sharing. And I also found that Disney has a Marvel star from the Marvel films. They usually do this show now, and is the host. And it's like they could make a connection that Jesus was kind of like the real superhero that saved the world. If you've ever seen the Action Bible at Walmart, the guy that did that, he's done an image that he's had on websites and stuff before. It has all the superheroes gathered around Jesus, like he's teaching them something. And like the Hulk's there, Batman, Superman, Captain America. It was not official. He just did this to make a point. Okay. And Jesus says to them, and that's how I saved the world. They're like all in awe. But
I gotta find that. That sounds awesome.
I'll find that for you.
Yeah.
And I was also going to mention that if you look, you can find this on YouTube, because I found this last night. There's a Christmas special from 1978 filmed at Walt Disney World, and about 38 minutes in, they have all the characters singing hymns in the costumes. And like when the Disney villains come out, they sing the line from "God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen," "Save us all from Satan's power when we're led astray," because they were treated like they were rascals back then. But they just think they were asking to be saved from Satan's power when they're led astray. And they sang, "Oh Holy Night," "Some Children See Him," "Joy to the World," "Silent Night." These are all the characters in the parks. And you would not see the characters in the parks even acknowledge God now. And even when Walt wrote that one essay for Guidepost, I couldn't find the illustration, but the illustration is Mickey and Donald praying in a church. And I wish I could find a first copy of, the original copy of that just to have that as part of the history. I read the description, that's what it is, but I couldn't find it on anywhere online when I was looking. And I really looked.
Man, so okay. Obviously, the further we get from Walt's life, the further we get from his values at the company. You don't
Mhm.
have to be a rocket scientist to know that. So, those that were connected with him personally at the beginning, as they lived on beyond Walt, and his values were still entrenched for a good long while.
Yeah.
Uh, would you say? And I don't want to. It's kind of a lead in, really, into our next conversation, which I think, correct me if I'm wrong, we'll talk about Disney, the company, after Walt. Until, what do you think? Maybe we go roughly to the year 2000 next
Yeah,
time.
I'm going to try to get us to from when Walt died to about 2000.
Okay, yeah.
But
So give us a little taste of what we can expect from that conversation.
I'm going to set up how they regenerized the Disney company, and they brought in all these people to, and it all ties into things Walt did. He started a school in the '60s, and that's what they trained the people that would end up leading Disney. And it was always this constant fight between the Eisner management and the people that came because they cared. And that's where it's going to go.
Yeah.
I didn't even get into the school because that kind of ties in this too. Walt did a lot of good deeds he didn't brag about. He didn't seek attention,
Mm-hmm.
And like when they were building Disneyland, you could see it every week where the progress. And there was this boy dying of cancer, and he wanted to ride the train around Disneyland. And Walt found out about this letter that came to the studio, and they contacted the parents. They said, bring him out. And the morning they got the train there, that's when he did this. He let the boy drive the train. There was hardly any buildings there. He took him around telling him where all the buildings were going to be. And
How cool.
yeah. But I mean, what head of a company would do something like that now, And
That's super cool.
there was there's a lot of these good deed stories, but the other one I wanted to really get to today was there was the Golden Horseshoe Review at Disneyland, because Walt had that background with vaudeville, so he wanted a vaudeville show in his park. And the guy he hired for that, he wrote a book here, Wally Boag. And Wally Boag had a daughter, and she ended up dying of a brain tumor. And Walt covered all of the expenses for her medical expenses. And Wally passed on what he learned from Walt. I mean, he was a Universalist. Wally was a Christian Universalist. Walt had newspaper boys around the park, like 10-year-old boys. They would pretend they were newspaper boys, selling papers. And one of these boys, he walked into the Golden Horseshoe Review, and he just got enthralled watching Wally Boag. He went there all the time studying this show, and Wally taught him how to do some of the things in his act, and took him under his wing, taught him all the stuff. And that boy grew up to be Steve Martin. And and we'll link to the clip of Wally Boag too. If you look at Wally Boag's act, you can see Steve Martin, where he learned all of the when he would do stand-up, because he would do balloon animals just like Wally. And when Wally died, he gave the eulogy for Wally's funeral, and he wrote he put on Twitter that Wally was the comedian that inspired him, his first comedian he ever saw live, and great influence on his life. You just never know who you're going to influence. And Wally also he discovered Julie Andrews when she was a child star in England. This was before Disney. This was before Disney. And he performed with her in vaudeville in England. And so if Walt didn't know about that when he hired Julie Andrews, but then after Mary Poppins came out, she did a performance where they did the old act with Wally on the Golden Horseshoe Review.
That is so awesome. And by the way, folks, all of the links that Ed has alluded to today, he's going to put everything in an email to me that I'm going to copy and paste and put in the
you already got sent it, but I'll send it again.
Okay. Oh, you already sent everything?
I sent everything. You've got them all in one email. That's okay.
Thank you. Then I didn't know. See, look at that. He's already ahead of the curve here.
Well, I didn't know that we were going to play the video till you mentioned it on Pat's show the other day.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, man. Once I figured out how to play these videos, I was like, oh, now we're going to have visual aids today. Yay.
What really influenced Walt, where in those essays where he talked about it was more about deeds than just words. That all ties in with Mary Poppins too, because his favorite song was the Bird Woman song, "Feed the Birds, Tuppence a Bag," and that's what that song's about. And every Friday at the studio, when the Sherman Brothers would come in and they'd kind of update what they're working on, and then he would look out the window and they knew he wanted him to play that. He wanted them to play that song, and he would play that song. And that's what it was. He would say that's what life's all about, and that kind of sums up his whole theology there, because it's not really about feeding birds. It's about doing something to help others, and that's what the whole film of Mary Poppins is really about. The moral of it.
So we have quite a bit still to discuss because I want to take some questions. So
Yeah,
anybody that has questions, please just put them in the chat. And I'll try to find them. If you have questions for Ed, and we'll get to them. I already have a couple highlighted I want to go back up and revisit. But it sounds like we're at least committed. Today is Saturday, January 6th. It sounds like next Saturday, the 13th and the 20th. It sounds like we already have a date there, because we got to talk about the company after Walt, and that'll get us roughly, like you said, to the year 2000, and then 2000 to today. So we're at least committed for a 4-part series. Again, I've been saying since the beginning, I don't know how many of these conversations we're going to do.
I'll go as long as you want to go.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so let me scroll up here. Any questions you have about Disney, y'all? We should finish every episode like this, by the way. Wombat Mommy. Ed, I have a question about the hearse in front of the Haunted Mansion. Do you have some information? Do you know anything about the hearse in front of the Haunted Mansion?
The hearse is there, but it was put there after Walt died. The Haunted Mansion was built after he died. He started it, and it was in the original plans for Disneyland, but he never got a handle on what they were going to do. And they built the facade years in advance, and people were asking, why is this dilapidated building there? And Walt put out the press release. They're out collecting the ghosts. They're going to have this for their retirement home. It was originally the retirement home for ghosts. And you can see a clip of him on his show where he talks about how they're out collecting the ghosts.
I love it.
I mean, there's a whole thing about how they built that Haunted Mansion.
I knew, sight unseen, you would still hit a home run on these questions.
Well, some of these.
Let's see.
And I hope that was what she was asking about. I mean, I hope that answers the question. A lot of these ideas come around afterwards.
Julie Forever T, I would love to see Ed make a docu-series about Walt. Have you ever thought about doing something where you really put his legacy down into your own? A lot of
people that do that, they get their videos pulled down too, because Disney doesn't really want. I really don't have the software and all that stuff to do that. I could do things like that, I guess, but I mean, this has all been a surprise that we're going to talk about him. So
yeah. Let's see. Yeah, I kind of sprung it on you just a couple of weeks ago here. Any other questions anybody has for Ed? Fire away. Now's your chance.
Well, you're getting it. I'll put another quick story in about Walt.
Okay.
One time Walt was sitting all by himself, like in that photo we showed. And he was sitting there eating a sandwich. These nuns come in. There's they got all these kids tied to each other, tied to them. And Walt looks up at him and he says, well, what's all this about? And they said, these are underprivileged children and we're taking them to Disneyland. And Walt set his sandwich down. He asked, how much did you pay to get in? They told him. He walked over to the ticket booth, got him a refund. He said, you don't pay to come in here. This is what this place is for.
Wow.
I mean, real decent guy.
No kidding. Man, that's awesome. Let me just see if any other, let's see. Oh, wait, what's this? Yeah. I think there's a follow-up from Wombat Mommy on the hearse thing. On the back of the 10 toys says that it's Brigham Young's hearse that was used for his funeral. Huh.
That might be what they where they bought it, because a lot of the carriages that the coaches and stuff, those were all real at Disneyland and Frontierland. Those were authentic from the 1800s. It could be.
Oh my goodness, that's wild. What's this here? Discuss Disney on TV in the 60s and 70s. You got any thoughts on that?
We'll go back to it. That's like its whole subject. I'll mention before we go. I will talk about one of the movies. There's Scarecrow Romney Marsh, because we got asked about that last time, and that was from the 60s. That was from 1964. And it only debuted in America as a TV show. And if you see it, watch the 3-part show, because it's got more information in it than is in the feature. But I can do the questions before I talk about that.
I guess Julie wants some Walt didn't want to charge people, or he just meant for the orphans, right?
Well, he didn't charge the orphan kids, but originally they
Yeah.
didn't want to charge a gate fee to get into Disneyland, but they had to because so many people were storming in. It was breaking the fire codes and all that.
Oh my good! Wait a minute! Wait
Well,
a minute!
on
This is
that
the first-
opening, on that opening day when you saw with Reagan, there were
Mhm.
so many counterfeit tickets that people had that they it overwhelmed the everything. They ran out of food and the bathrooms backed up. And we can go into a Disneyland episode sometime. But
wow, look at this, man.
He charged you had to buy tickets to ride the rides, but you could enter the park for free back then. That was the original concept.
Okay.
You'd had tickets, and
Gotcha.
that's where the term e-ticket ride come from. You'd get an e-ticket. They were all different letters and everything.
That is so wild, man. I love this stuff. It's so cool. Okay. Hold on a second. I got to get to Minnesota Dave. Yeah,
Okay.
Here we go. Look at this. See this? This is going to turn into a channel of its own. Yeah.
Well,
Ed,
maybe.
Ed, I would honestly, I would encourage you to start a channel, and I will happily promote it, where you just, however often you want to do it, do a presentation. I mean, you're welcome to keep doing it here, but I don't want to hog you because it sounds like you've got endless ideas for episodes, and I think that's
I
a
like
great
having
idea.
somebody to bounce off of asking questions. I don't like just talking to myself. That's the
Okay.
only thing.
Okay,
know?
all right, that's fair.
Not that
Whatever
I'm
you want.
hogging not that I'm hogging your channel. I'll come as long as you want to have me.
That's great. That's great. So we've got. It just sounds like endless discussions to have on this stuff. Okay, are there other thoughts in this realm of today that maybe I accidentally skipped past, or that we need to go back and give more details?
Well, I wanted to talk about Pollyanna and Dr. Sin, Scarecrow Romney Marsh, because those are probably the live action films where there's the most Christianity in them. And
Okay.
I'll start with Pollyanna. Pollyanna was this. You people kind of thought of it as this overly saccharine, sweet story. But what Walt did with it was about the town being intimidated by this wealthy woman that ran the town. Even the pastor was intimidated by this woman. And within the course of the story, that's Dr. Sin there.
Oh, my bad. See, I don't know my Disney
okay.
stuff. That's why I have you here.
That's okay. I think I called it Carl Malden.
Okay.
But,
all right, I'll try to find it. You keep talking. I'll look for it.
The pastor had let this woman intimidate him, and he was always doing these fire and brimstone sermons. And he meets Pollyanna. Her parents were missionaries that died overseas, and this aunt that has control of the town. She lives with the aunt, but then she's preaching about the gladness and all this stuff. She's always this optimistic person, and she sees the pastor out into a field studying for a sermon. And she confronts him about the glad texts that her father, he went through the Bible and counted them. And it inspires the pastor. He realizes that what he's done, and he changes his whole outlook. And he also takes a stand against the woman that's running the town. There's going to have this charity bazaar against her. And he wouldn't get involved in politics because that's divisive. It sounds familiar,
Right.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And when they were all the people were leaving the church that Sunday, he stops them and he says he's going to endorse this charity bazaar they're doing. And what ends up happening is Pollyanna, she something happens to her and she loses her faith, and the whole town comes to see her, and ends up changing the aunt. And that's the end of the film. And this was, I think he was trying to make it to be nominated for an Oscar. I don't remember if it was or not. But it was a very high-level production at the time. And Haley Mills was in this. And we didn't mention shepherding the kids, but Walt shepherded his child stars' careers. And Stanley Kubrick wanted to put her in the movie Lolita. That's kind of a pedo kind of thing. And Walt wouldn't let him do it. And he advised against doing this in the career. And the actress that did do that film, the child actress, that kind of ruined her whole career. And you look today at all the child stars that have gone through Disney. It's like one after another, how they turn out. Miley Cyrus, you can look her up. She would give acceptance speeches at getting awards. She would thank Jesus Christ as the only man in her life and all this stuff. And then 4 years later, look what she was doing. And back then, there were only two that had train wreck things. One of them was Tommy Kirk. He was started out on the Mickey Mouse Club in the serials. He was one of the Hardy Boys, but he was in the Shaggy Dog. You'd recognize him. Merlin Jones, all these different films. He was in the Absent-Minded Professor. What he did was he was gay, and he got caught with an underage boy in a swimming pool, and he was doing more than grooming, and Walt fired him over it. And when all the stories talk about it, they say Walt fired him because he was gay. They didn't fire him because he was gay. They fired him because he was in a sexual encounter with an underage boy. And the mother called the studio and alerted Walt that this was going on. And this was like Walt's big star. He was in so many of these films, Old Yeller. And Walt let him go because of this. And that's why they let him go. And he was brought back to finish a sequel to The Misadventures of Merlin Jones. But they treated him very coldly. They just wanted to get him out of there. And when they do the histories, they try to say it was because he was gay that he was fired. It wasn't because he was gay. It was because he was in this liaison with this underage boy. And the other one that turned out sad was Bobby Driscoll, and he was in Song of the South, and he was a child star, and the last role he did was Peter Pan. And when he got let go, he couldn't get work, and he ended up getting mixed into drugs and things. And I think he died when he was 30 from a drug overdose. And they only found out because the mom wanted the Disney studio to find him because they wanted to reconnect with him. And this was after Walt had died. This was in like 1970. And then they found out that he had died in a pauper's grave because of drugs and everything. And what's kind of sad about that is there's this movie on Disney Plus about the Rescue Rangers where Peter Pan's the villain. And it's pretty much Bobby Driscoll's story. And they've kind of made it into a joke almost. And it was very tragic. But
boy, there's so much to discuss.
Nobody's shepherding these kids now. And the other one we were going to touch on, Dr. Sin.
That's the one I messed up and put up. Right.
Well, it's okay. He's this very popular film among a lot of people, but Disney won't release it to mainstream, because it's about a pastor who takes care of his parish being like a superhero kind of a thing. He's a smuggler, and it's based on a real life guy, but he wasn't named Dr. Sin. He was named Ramsley, and there's a character in the film called Ramsley. That's why. And Dr. Sin would it's a very suspenseful film, but watch it's the 3 episodes because Walt tied so much into it with the founding of America, with the Revolution, because you talk about men getting pressed in the military. They depict that in this film. And the pastor warns his men that the Navy press gang's coming, so they can all flee. And he's confronting King George. And that's what this whole film is about. And Walt funded this authentic church for the time. It was in ruin, and Walt funded to rebuild that church to be in the film. And the clergyman that was in charge of this area, he ended up being a consultant on the film because they got acquainted. That church became an active church again. But would they do that with modern Hollywood? Rebuild a church? And even the stuff with the films, I had more we won't get into, but after Walt died, there were still times where they would put things in the films regarding faith. There was one of them that's one of those silly comedies. And it was about a church congregation solving a mafia crime kind of thing. It was the North Avenue Irregulars. And then there was, you might remember the Black Hole. That was Disney's competition to Star Wars. It was 1978. The original ending for that, when they go through the black hole, it was going to pan down, and it was going to reveal that they're all standing at the bottom of the Sistine Chapel, looking up at the creation of man, God creating Adam. And the reason that wasn't in there, they would consider it disrespectful. But they filmed it. Wow. They went over to this. They got special permission to film this, the Sistine Chapel, and they filmed everything. But it wasn't in the film because of that being disrespectful. So they were actually the opposite of today, where they were actually worried about what would be considered disrespectful to other.
Wow, such a different world now. And what I've been doing here while you've been talking is I'm writing down all of these things that I think we need to talk about. And I think really, as I started to write this, it occurred to me, this is actually a list you need to come up with, Ed. And you need to break out all of these different episode ideas and then we'll get them scheduled, and we'll make sure that we
Well,
cover.
so I'd like to when we talk between ourselves, I'd like to hear what you had, and we'll collaborate and figure out. Because every time we do these, I make notes, and we only get to like half the notes. But I'm over prepared every time. But there's just so much stuff.
So much.
You don't hear about it, and I'm glad
I appreciate you're sharing this knowledge with us, man. Because this is stuff that needs to be. There has to be a record of this stuff, And
that's why I show these books and things so people know. Like Wally Boag had a autobiography, and it's out of print now, but the Disney Family Museum still sells these online if anyone's interested. You got to pay more for shipping, but it's a lot cheaper than hundreds of dollars for a book. And that reminds me, this book here, this was about the Mickey Mouse Club. It's a scrapbook, and the man who edited this, we'll meet him next time. That's Howard Ashman. He wrote the songs for Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and Aladdin. And he was really charged with, credited with jump-starting the animation department at Disney. We'll get into more detail with that. I didn't mention one other thing. They did a biblical epic. Disney did in the 50s.
Okay.
Yeah, it was called The Big Fisherman. It was written by it was based on a book written by the guy that did The Robe. And it cost $6 million.
I have a feeling it's not on Disney Plus.
No, I don't even think they own it anymore. But it's on YouTube. It's almost 3 hours long. It was a biblical epic roadshow thing. And
cool.
It starred Howard Keel. He was a big star at the time, but who we know him for now is it's a film that's canceled. 7 Brides for 7 Brothers. And he was the oldest brother. And if you look up the Candlelight Processional, there's a recording of him Disney put out in the 80s. That's him doing it. That's their only official recording of that, but it was still getting watered down by that time, the content. But the film wasn't that successful or everything. And all the sources you read, there was a fight between Walt and Roy over this film, but they don't say what the fight was, who was for it and who was against it. They conflict on that. But there was some kind of a feud, and sometime around there, Roy left Freemasonry. And I don't know if that's connected. Needs more research, but it makes you wonder.
That's very interesting. All right. Well, Ed, as always, man, thank you for your time, and thank you guys for participating in the chat and for watching this. If y'all have any questions for Ed, I guess Ed is the best place to contact you through your Twitter handle there @real_.
I've heard from some of you, and that's some of the stuff I went and researched because people asked me about it.
Yeah, and there you see it on the screen @real_Ed_McCrae.
And that was when I originally contacted you, I was just Ed McCrae over there, and they canceled my account because I was sharing stories about Riley Gaines, about all those kind of things, and they said it was hate speech and caused violence.
Okay, tell me that was under the old regime. Or was it the new regime?
It was when they switched over, but they've never brought it back. I started a different name, and I eventually changed it to that. That's originally why Uncle Remus was on my photo. I did have myself up there, but I wanted to kind of see if I would get to stay. And
let me ask you this: are your DMs open so that people can contact you privately?
I've had some of them contact me through there. You can do that. Go ahead.
Very good. Very good.
I usually write back, unless it's somebody trying to. Those porn bots.
Yeah. By the way, there's a lot of comments there in the chat, and I'm telling you, they're pushing for you starting your own channel. You are always welcome here to discuss this stuff here, but I do want you to give some consideration to that as well as an option, because, brother, I think you could give these presentations on different aspects of the Disney Corporation forever. And anyway, I just looking forward to having you back on next week at this same time. We'll do and please share this video too, and encourage your friends to come and join us during the live conversations.
I can.
Yeah. So we'll do this again a week from today. So let's go ahead and agree upon, right? At least we got the next 2 weeks. The 20th and the 27th. I'm sorry, 13th and 20th. I don't even know what day it is anymore. Today's
Well,
the 6th, Keith.
I don't know the dates offhand, but I'm just planning on next Saturday.
I love it. I love it, man. Okay. Well, thank y'all so much for making time. Ed, thank you, of course, for another awesome presentation.
You're welcome.
And we look forward to talking again soon. Thanks, everybody. Y'all have a great weekend.